Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Madhava Kunjabi Adi Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatiravanam Chadi Yamunatiravanam Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Brajajanarandana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatiravanam Chadi Yamunatiravanam Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jayom Vishnu Paramahansa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Simad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're, what was that? Continuing with this verse. I think it's going to take more than one more day. Today, probably also tomorrow. Just a refresher. The first 30 verses, Brahma is discussing or disclosing the opulent aspect of Krishna Tattva. Then 31 through 40, the sweetness aspect of Krishna Tattva. In 31, attention went to the mothers and the cows. And text 32, attention went to Nanda, cowherd men, and all the residents of Vrindavan. And saying that they're just aho bhagyam, how fortunate they are, because they have this intimate relationship with Krishna as friend. And now this verse is saying not only they're fortunate, but they've extended their good fortune to us, the presiding deities of various senses. 11 in number. Here's the translation. Yet, even though the extent of the good fortune of these residents of Vrindavan is inconceivable, we, 11 presiding deities of the various senses, headed by Lord Shiva, are also most fortunate because the senses of these devotees of Vrindavan are the cups through which we repeatedly drink the nectar, the nectarian, intoxicating beverage of the honey of your lotus feet. So there's his lotus feet. One of the questions that came up yesterday that I said we would discuss today has its response. Hang on a moment. Three 326, 21. And 326, this is Kapila Dev's explanation of Sankhya. That means the unfolding of the creation in sequence from one into the next. We mentioned this yesterday. That is the sense object, and the demigod overseeing the sense and the interaction of the senses with the sense object. That's Sankhya. That's one aspect of Sankhya. And the purpose of all of that, the elements, is so that Brahma can create the universe. He has to have the ingredients. And he's one of the demigods, one of the presiding deities of the senses. He's one of those 11 that's mentioned. And we explained that there's actually 14. This is just a reminder. 5 and 5. 5 knowledge acquiring, 5 working senses makes 10. Mind, intelligence, false ego makes 13. And then number 14 is chitta, kind of a mysterious, it's translated in different ways, but contaminated consciousness is one way. And Vasudeva is the presiding deity of chitta, or consciousness. So the way that we read the commentary yesterday, 3 are eliminated out of the 14, leaves 11. And the organ of defecation and the organ of urination were eliminated because they're vulgar. And then Vasudeva is eliminated because he's the presiding deity, making 11. So then the question came, what about Pradyumna and Aniruddha? What's their position? And for that matter, Sankarshan. So this is 3:26:21. You can look it up later. I'll read. The mode of goodness, which is clear, the clear, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva, or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahatattva. Mahatattva. What's Mahatattva? Mahatattva is the totality of the material energy once it becomes differentiated into its different parts. So prior to that, its pradhan is undifferentiated. Mahatattva is the same, but it's differentiated into different parts. Purport. The Vasudeva manifestation, or the status of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called pure goodness, or Shuddha Sattva. In the Shuddha Sattva status, there is no infringement of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. In Vedic literature, there is mention of the Lord's expansions of the 4 personalities of Godhead, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Here is the appearance of the Mahatattva. Here, in the appearance of the Mahatattva, the 4 expansions of Godhead occur. He who is seated within as Supersoul expands first as Vasudeva. Now, the topic here is presiding deities of the senses. The topic that I just read is not the presiding deities of the senses yet. They'll have their role, but it's in the appearance of the Mahatattva, the 4 expansions of Godhead occur. Paragraph. The Vasudeva state is free from infringement by material desires and is the status in which one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the objective, which is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Adbhuta. Adbhuta. This is another feature of the Mahatattva. The Vasudeva expansion is also called Krishna consciousness, for it is free from all tinges of material passion and ignorance. This clear state of understanding helps one to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vasudeva status is also explained in Bhagavad Gita as Kshetragya. So those of you that take Bhakti Shastri, you know what Kshetragya is. Chapter 13, Kshetra and Kshetragya, the knower of the field. And Krishna says there's 2, the living entity and Paramatma. 2 Kshetragyas within the Kshetra, within the field of activity of the body. So this Vasudeva status is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita as Kshetragya, which refers to the knower of the field of activities as well as the superknower. The living being who has occupied a particular type of body knows that body, but the Supersoul Vasudeva knows not only the particular type of body, but also the field of activities in all the different varieties of bodies. In order to be situated in clear consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one must worship Vasudeva. Vasudeva is Krishna alone. When Krishna or Vishnu is alone, Without the accompaniment of his internal energy, he is Vasudeva. When he is accompanied by his internal potency, he is called Dwarkadish. To have clear consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one has to worship Vasudeva. It is also explained in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to Vasudeva, such a great soul is very rare. So now this is the important paragraph, but the context of things is important. In order to get released from false ego, so that's one of the 11, correct? One must worship Sankarshan. Sankarshan is also worshipped through Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva is one of the 11 devatas, and Lord Shiva worships Sankarshan. He derives his power from Sankarshan. He is a devotee of Sankarshan. So that's where Sankarshan fits in. He's not one of the presiding deities. Shiva is the presiding deity, presiding over false ego, but he's answerable to Sankarshan. And you appreciate. So Sankarshan is an expansion. Ultimately, let's go back. Sankarshan is the expansion of the original personality Godhead. And there's stages in between. So there's where Sankarshan fits in. Now what about Pradyumna and Aniruddha? Prabhupada writes, the snakes which cover the body of Lord Shiva are representations of Sankarshan, and Lord Shiva is always absorbed in meditation upon Sankarshan. One who is actually a worshipper of Lord Shiva, as a devotee of Sankarshan, can be released from false material ego. Next. If one wants to get free from mental disturbances, one has to worship Aniruddha. For this purpose, worship of the moon planet is also recommended in the Vedic literature. So one of the 11 presiding deities is the moon, Chandra. And Chandra derives his power ultimately from Krishna, but from Aniruddha. So one can say Aniruddha is the Lord of the mind. One can also say Chandra is the presiding deity of the mind. There was a devotee in Mayapur, Prabhupada disciple, and every time there was a full moon, he kind of went mad. He was affected by the moon. His mind was affected by the moon. And the day after, when the waning moon started, he would get normal again. But he was like very unpredictable on full moon. So the moon affects the mind. It's poetic, but it's more than poetic. In poetry, the moon has some image, the feeling aspect, the affection aspect of one's life in poetic writings. But it's more than just poetic. There's a reason why it's there. So the moon is the presiding deity of these 11 over the mind. We'll see that shortly. But when we hear that, we can also remember Aniruddha is the Lord of the moon. He's the Lord of the mind, in other words. So ultimately, Krishna is the Lord of everything. But we can break it down into parts, and that's for purpose of creation. Similarly, to be fixed in one's intelligence, one has to worship Pradyumna, who is reached through the worship of Brahma. These matters are explained in Vedic literature. So that the reference source is 3:26:21, and that's the position of Pradyumna. He's the Lord of Brahma. I mean, Krishna is the Lord of Brahma. But that's where the role of Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan is. And they're not listed as presiding deities. Rather, Vasudeva is directly the presiding deity of Chitta. So now we're ready to go further with this topic. I hope you can follow. So over on the left, we see there's Lord Brahma with the various demigods. Lord Shiva is to his left shoulder or our right. And then other demigods there at the shore of the Milk Ocean. And they're, in different times they go to Lord Vishnu for help. That's where that picture comes from. Understanding this text 33 requires some elementary understanding of universal form and Sankhya. Remember I said if you read Canto 3, Canto 2 and Canto 3 and Canto 5 that describe the universal form, it'll help you understand Canto 10. And when you read Canto 3, it's mind-spinning. That was my experience. It's a whole other model than what we're used to in, high school chemistry or even college chemistry or college anything. It's a different model. So here's a little description, not comprehensive by any means, the Lord's universal form. That's just 26. There are three primary accounts of the universal form given in the scriptures. Those that are directly perceived, like Arjuna seeing the universal form, and so forth. Those that are authoritatively described, like we're finding in Canto 3 and other places, and those that are simply imagined. So we don't pay much attention to the imagined ones, but it does speak of the imagined ones. There are imagined ideas of the universal form. Srimad Bhagavatam is from the second category of accounts, those that are authoritatively described, and constitutes a sound form depiction of Vedic cosmology. Shabda Praman, right? Shabda Praman. So here's an image from Shabda Praman. An artist made a drawing of what they heard from Srimad Bhagavatam. And do you have that little device that amplifies sound? Yeah? So here's a picture of one universe, as you see across the top, and shortly we're going to have a 3D, or rather a video presentation on what you see on the screen right now. This is a two-dimensional picture, and we're going to see a three-dimensional picture. Compliments of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium explaining the structure of the universe. So in one universe at the bottom, there we see Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and of course, he's not literally at the bottom of the universe. He's halfway, because the bottom half of the universe is filled with Garbhodak water. Yeah. And then just above the Garbhodak water, there are the 7 lower planetary systems. Actually, below those 7 lower planetary systems is hell. Hell is not one of the lower 7 planetary systems. It's below that. It doesn't take up much space, but it's really a busy place. And then there's the 7 lower planetary systems, and then there's the 7 upper. And then the Earth is of the 7 upper, called Bhumandala. And then Bhuvar Loka And in Bhuvarloka, you'll find yakshas. You'll hear it in this video presentation. Yakshas, kinnaras, apsaras, siddhas. We hear about those entities. They're not in the heavenly region. They're in the Bhuvarloka region. That's where they reside. And then there's the heavenly region. You see there's Indra in the heavenly region. And then there's 3 planetary systems above that. We'll see them shortly. Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka. And then at the very top of the universe, that's Brahma, and Brahmaloka is there. And then there's the coverings of the universe. Those are those colored, on the upper left corner, those are color-coded layers of the universe. And then we find other things, that there's Durga, because this is Devi Dham, and so forth. So, let's go to the video, and I think you'll find it interesting. I hope it works. Where is it?
So at the bottom of the planetary display, we have Shesha holding up the earth. This is Shesha, the empowered incarnation. There we have Ananta speaking Bhagavatam to the 4 Kumaras, and above, the 7 subterranean planets. Here we can see Jambudvip, the central island of Bhumandala, and Bharatvarsha is situated on the southern side of that. There's 8 other Varshas, with Ilavrita Varsha in the center, various supporting mountains with large trees upon them, described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the very center of Ilavrita Varsha is Mount Meru, the Golden Mountain. Atop Mount Meru are the cities of important demigods, Lord Brahma in the center, 8 Dikpalas in the cardinal directions and sub-directions. Moving out, we can see the broader Bhumandala, 7 concentric islands and oceans surrounding them. The 7th of these islands is Pushkaradweep. On that island is Manasotra mountain, and on the mountain there's various cities of demigods such as Indra. Out further is the Lokaloka mountain. These large elephants stand atop Lokaloka mountain to balance Bhumandala. Outside of Lokaloka mountain is Aloka Varsha, which is dark. The rays of the sun and the other luminaries extend up to Lokaloka mountain. On Manasotra mountain here on Pushkaradweep, the sun travels above this mountain at the southernmost point of its annual orbit. Above Bhumandala is Bhuvarloka, which is the residence of the Charanas, Siddhas, Yakshas, Gandharvas. And above there is Swargaloka, beginning from the sun and extending up to the pole star Dhruvaloka. This is the moving part of the planetary display. Here we can see the sun and the moon moving in their chariots. The chariots are being drawn by horses moving in the anti-clockwise direction, but they're traveling with the wheel of time moving in the clockwise direction faster. So it looks as if they're moving backwards. Above them, the zodiac of stars, more planets, and another realm of stars. So here we can see everything moving with the Kala Chakra, circumambulating the axis that connects Mount Meru with Dhruvaloka. Above these planets, we come to the planet of the 7 sages, the Saptarshi. You can see them here, they're commonly known as the Big Dipper, and then Dhruvaloka, the pole star. On the ocean of milk situated there, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who is the Paramatma within everyone's heart. He resides on Anantashesh. Moving up beyond there, we have Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. In this video, we haven't included many of the details for there, but on Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, we have residences of the Lord, such as Lord Varaha, Brahmana, and so on. Here's Brahmaloka, and on Brahmaloka, we also have a form of the Lord, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, as the Sahasrashesha Purush. Beyond there is the seven coverings of the universe, earth, water, fire, etc. And outside of the universes is the abode of Lord Shiva, Shiva Loka. There he resides eternally. Beyond Shiva Loka, we come to Mahavishnu, Karanodakashaya Vishnu, with innumerable universes that are emanating from the pores of his transcendental body. Here you can see him being served by Rama Devi. Then we come to the Brahmajyoti, the effulgence of the Lord's transcendental body. Penetrating through the Brahmajyoti, we come to the Vaikuntha planets. We're showing 24 planets of the Vaikuntha realm in this model. The Lord, with 4 arms, is holding the conch, disc, club, and lotus, and the various combinations of those 4 make 24. Then we come to Goloka Vrindavan. Here we can see Radha Madhava, but we'll also be showing the other primary rasas, Krishna with the cowherd boys, Krishna being served, Krishna with Mother Yashoda. So this is an overview of the planetary display to be shown in the main dome of the temple.
The narrating voice is the devotee that has the authority over the whole Temple of Vedic Planetarium project, Antardweep. And that's just a video of what you saw, two-dimensional depiction of the universe. Now, we're going to go back to text 33. And the focus is going to go to the 11 controlling deities of the senses. So that's the whole of Vedic cosmology is the universal form. The universal, let's say it in reverse. The universal form is Vedic cosmology. In 5th canto, when Vedic cosmology is introduced, Shukadeva Goswami says, this is just a summary of something that's unlimitedly detailed. It is the universal form. And at the end, he said, now I've described the universal form. So you can equate at least the 5th canto model of universal form is Vedic cosmology, or Vedic cosmology is a depiction of the universal form. So we read from Canto 3 about the arising of the universal form. That's, so the comment here is, this verse, text 33, reveals the practical application of the second category of the universal form, or that which is authoritatively described. So now let's go down a little bit and hear something about the 11 devatas presiding over the senses. Here's their names. Brahma. We're going to see images for each one of these shortly, but he presides over intelligence, Shiva over false ego, Chandra the moon. The directions, remember that little video at the top of Sumero? It says there's Brahma at the top and then the Digpals. Remember that? So we mentioned it yesterday also. We're going to hear it again today. So you can like sink in. Digpal means protectors of the universe in the directions. In 2 dimensions, it's 8. North, east, south, and west, and then in between, northeast, etc., and then up and down, vertical and down, up and down. So that's 10. There's 10. There's 10 Digpals. But in the universal form, it shows 8 with Brahma at the center, because he's giving them intelligence. And they're getting their power to do what they do from their counterparts in the spiritual realm. Okay? Only by the sanction and power of these 11 demigods can the material senses experience material objects. So here's an image. You'll see this image again. But these are various demigods, or goddess Lakshmi on the far right. These are material demigods. There's the spiritual Lakshmi, and there's the material one. There's the sun god in the center. Anyway, Vayu, and over in the far left, that's Chandra, the moon. So the senses can't act. So in the description in chapter 26, everything is all set up, except the demigods can't do anything. So they go to Lord Vishnu, it's Shiradakshay Vishnu, and say, help, we can't do anything. He said, no problem. I'll expand myself as Vasudeva, and then you can do stuff. And then they can do stuff. When he enters, without Paramatma, they can't function. The demigods are dependent. We're dependent upon them. Our sensory capacity is dependent on them. Their ability to empower our sensory capacity or withdraw it or dial it down is dependent upon Paramatma. Okay, now here's this image again. So in this verse expands on the unfolding of the universe as found in Canto 3, chapter 26, which includes the role of the demigods in this unfolding process and the demigods' dependence on Paramatma to perform their respective functions. So we hear in that section, Agni presides over the organ of speech. Vayu presides over the olfactory sense, smell. Surya presides over the sense of sight. The Dig Devatas or Dig Palas preside over the auditory sense. The Ashvini Kamaras preside over the touch sensation. Indra is the deity presiding over the hands. The presiding deity of movement is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Specifically, we'll hear shortly, this is Upendra. We're going to hear it actually when I start reading from the commentary, the next commentary lined up. Upendra, or Vamana, is an empowered incarnation, Shaktivesha avatar, or Avesha avatar. So this is referring, when you see the image here, it means Vamana, and he's in a special category, some say, but the deity of movement, locomotion, the power to go from one place to another. The moon is the presiding deity of the mind. Lord Brahma is the presiding deity of intelligence. Lord Shiva is the presiding deity of false ego. And then the Virat Purusha can't do anything yet. The Virat Purusha, the universal form, can't do anything. It's not being aroused. That's the language in the Bhagavatam. And so that's when the demigods go to the Lord Svetadweep and they pray. And then a different language is used in different places, but Super Soul or Antaryami or Vasudev or Kshatragya, who presides over consciousness, Chitta or Chaitya. So here's the verse from Canto 3, chapter 26. You can look it up later. When the inner controller, Antaryami, right? The deity presiding over consciousness. Now I just added this along with Chitta. It's not in the Prabhupada's translation. Entered the heart of the universal form with reason. At that very moment, the cosmic being, the Virat Rupa, arose from the causal waters, and voila, you get quickly the universal form that it's dynamic. It starts to move and do things. Because the universe isn't static, it's dynamic. It's dynamic because Vasudeva has entered. Just like our bodies, a little part or the big, micro or macro. It requires spirit to move matter. So here's a little picture. There's that disc called Bhumandala, the whole big thing, that's the Brahmanda, that's one universe, and at the bottom half, that's Garbhodak Ocean. So here's commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about this verse, text 33. Sri Krishna's eternal associates, independently experience the Lord's form and sound by their own spiritual senses without any influence of the mundane demigods. So the Nityasiddha devotees that take part in Krishna's pastimes are not dependent upon the mundane demigods. That's the point. The 11 deities presiding over the material senses cannot experience what the material senses are perceiving, even for conditioned souls. They're not experiencing our pains and pleasures. Super soul is. But they're not. They're just governing the function. That's like, say, somebody in a government position. They're executing laws. They're governing according to their guidelines and codes, but they don't know what you're experiencing or I'm experiencing. They're just controllers. So similarly, the controllers, demigods, they're not experiencing what the senses are perceiving, but they're empowering it or withdrawing that power. Since the bodies of the Brijbasis are spiritual, the 11 deities could experience Krishna through their sense or senses, which means the Brijbasis are merciful. Now that's one rendering. The mercy received by the Brijbasis is extended very kindly to the demigods. That's one rendering. Commentary, this is very interesting. This verse, 11.14.33, is discussed in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, where the demigods have deep appreciation for the Brijbasis' consciousness and their application of their faculties of the senses provided to them by creation. The Brijbasis use their egos to identify themselves as servants of Krishna. This is Sanatana Goswami, Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Their intelligence to make up their minds to always act for his satisfaction. That's their Brahma's appreciation. They use their eyes to see him. They use their tongues to chant his name. They use their ears to hear his glories. The Brijbasis are constantly utilizing their senses to receive and express their love for Krishna. That's their life, in their spiritual senses. There's proper and full utilization of their senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam, in a perfect degree. In this way, Brahma says, we, the 11 presiding deities of the senses, are experiencing Krishna's sweetness through the 11 senses of the inhabitants of Braja. That's Vishwanath's commentary. Now, we heard yesterday, that's just his ecstatic expression. Or, by the mercy of the Brijbasis, they're extending their happiness and their experience to the demigod observers. this is Jiva Goswami, making our senses such as the eyes into cups, we also directly repeatedly drink the sweet nectar from your lotus feet. So there's taking the Sanskrit, there are correct ways of translating the Sanskrit. So these are some of those correct ways of translating the Sanskrit, and different acharyas have, ecstatic experience of what those words mean in slightly different ways. And I believe this is our last slide. This is an image that shows that Digpalas, that's the directions, and then the Devatas, that's the persons. So the olfactory sense is controlled by them, and there's their names. North, south, east, west, etc. Now, if you remember from the video, there's two places. There's on top of Mount Sumeru, there's the 8 Digpalas, or Digdevatas. And then you may also remember on Palakshadweep, there's Manasotra Mountain, and on each direction, north, south, east, and west, he just mentions the abode of Indra. But there are also places where there's the abodes of these other three, Kuvera, Yamaraj, and Varuna. And those of you that are interested, in communication and collaboration with the person whose voice you heard the narration about the video and the structure of the planetarium that's going to be displayed in Mayapur. I wanted to know some things about Yamaraj and where does he reside, because it seems like there's different residences, sometimes this and sometimes that. And in fact, there are different residences of that one person. And in fact, he manifests himself in different places at the same time for service to the personality of Godhead. It was new to me, so it's probably new to you, to hear Yamaraj has different abodes, and he's simultaneously existing in those different abodes because he has different functions to do for the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord empowers him to expand himself, and he expands himself, and he's in different places at the same time because there's different functions. As I mentioned, that the 7 lower, 7 upper, below the 7 lower, I'll send the document and you can circulate it. Below the 7 lower planetary systems, there's this little space between the Patala Loka and the Garbhodak Ocean. And that little space is where hell is. And that's one of the residence places of Yamaraj. And according to the 5th canto Bhagavatam, the final chapter of the 5th canto describes some, and then it says actually there's millions. So in that little space, there's lots of places for hellish experience. And he presides there, in the hellish region. And there's a name for the place where he presides. And then he presides over some other places, which you can read the document. And it's cross-referenced with multiple, not just the Bhagavatam, but other scriptural references. So, he was very helpful. Antardweep was very helpful in sorting all this out. And he has to know all this stuff just, to do the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. Like, what's the universe look like? What are its different parts? How does it all work? It's really involved. When Danavir Maharaj, that you can go online and search, he did a 4-part also video of describing Vedic cosmology, which differs from Antardweeps, but that's okay, because there are different views on the same thing. And some of the interviews, I know this from speaking with him, he went to South India and interviewed really old sannyasis in the Madhva Sampradaya and the Sri Sampradaya, and then some younger ones too, that their whole life is just dedicated to this one thing. The cosmic manifestation and how it's structured, and how to piece together this and that and the other thing. And if you have a problem, take a deep breath and say, that's just fine, because these are very elevated persons, and that's all they do. I mean, it's the primary thing they do. They don't do deity worship. They don't do lots of other things. They just do this one thing, and they have a school that teaches it to those that are interested in this subject. It's very complex. And it's similar to, but different from, the Jyotisha. Jyotisha is that this text from the Vedas that deal with astrology. You need to know astronomy to know astrology. We'll say it. People that know astrology, they know astronomy. From the Vedic perspective, how does it work? Now, there's astrologers in other parts of the world. For example, there's astrologers in China. And Chinese cosmology and Vedic cosmology are almost identical. I don't know the details of how they're same and different, but it's very similar, if not close to. And the reason is the Vedic culture extended into China. Without going into detail, historically, it was in China. Vedic culture was in China. Things happened over time, a few million years, and things changed a lot. But the vestiges are there. Here's one that I know of. In the Bhagavatam, this one, the Bhagavatam 12th canto, there's a verse that says, one who gives a Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne on Bhadra Purnima gets all kinds of nice benefits. That same Purnima has its place in the Chinese lunar calendar, and they call it the Moon Festival. And they distribute mooncakes on that particular Ekadasi. Same Ekadasi. They don't call it Ekadasi. Its 11th day of the moon, but they don't call it Ekadasi. They call it the Moon Festival. And they observe it every year. And the date changes according to the lunar calendar. It's not a solar calendar. All that is, interesting, but just to make the point, there's a lot of homily or similarity between ancient cultures and ancient cultures. And, I don't know Vedic astronomy, and I don't know Vedic, I don't know Jyotisha Shastras. I know some people that do, but I don't know it. And, I know something about the universal form. I don't know what these sannyasis that dedicate their life to it. But if you view Danavir Maharaj's videos, you'll see charts and all kinds of details and ancient drawings of people that have spent their whole lifetime just studying this topic. Okay, so it's already 8:25, and I didn't get to read anything yet. I think I won't. We'll start tomorrow, and go through Jiva Goswami's commentary. But by the end, you'll understand better how this particular appreciation of Brahma, this is the controlling deity of the senses that's described in Canto 3 from the perspective of one of those controllers of the senses. In Canto 3, it's Maitreya describing to Vidura about the unfolding of the universe from the perspective of one who's hearing the unfolding of the universe. And now we're getting this picture from one of those controlling deities. And how that controlling deity, Brahma, is appreciating the good fortune, the amazing fortune of the residents of Vrindavan, having spiritual forms, experiencing directly, without the assistance of the controlling demigods, controllers of the senses, experiencing Krishna's sweetness, and by their mercy, they, the controlling deities, are also experiencing the sweetness of Krishna's mercy, or Krishna's form, in his pastimes. Brahma is honoring the Supreme Lord by honoring the Brijvasis, who are recipients of the Lord's mercy, because of the sweetness of their loving relationship with the Lord. He bestows his sweetness upon them, and they're experiencing happiness unknown to Brahma, but he's experiencing some happiness through their happiness. It's really wonderful. So let's see if there's some discussion.
A quick question, Guru Maharaj. The Indra's abode on the Golden Mountain on the Mansutra is
Yes.
still in the Bhuloka, and then it's a second.
Indra has different residences as well. One of them is in Swarga. Another one is on one of the Digpals. And another one is Manasotra Mountain. Those are three.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. This, as you were describing the different deities presiding over the senses, this one about movement.
Upendra.
Upendra. You said something about also Vamana.
The Upendra and Vamana are the same.
Okay.
I mean, the two names of the same person. There's three. Trivikram, Upendra, Vamana, different names of the same person or form of the Lord. Is that all right? Okay. Okay, let's go online.
This is from Rupa Vilas Prabhu. Knowing that hellish planets are such minute compared to the vast creation, I'm wondering what is the form of the soul in hell. If the soul has only subtle body, I'm wondering if the hellish experience is just like a long dream.
Yeah, it's like a long dream. Only it goes in a flash. Time on the heavenly planets, time in Brahmaloka, time in the lower planets, time in the hellish planets, it's all relative. But it feels like a whole lifetime, but it's just a flash. Okay? Next.
In 1, 2, 30, which form of Vishnu is referred? Vasudev, the controller of Chitta, or Mahavishnu? And in 1, 2, 31, refer to Garbhodakshaya Vishnu?
I have to take a look at, because I don't have the text. They can send the question and I'll respond to the question.
This is from Brajeshwari Prana Mataji from Bangalore. Sahasra Sirsha, does it mean 1,000 heads?
Yes.
If yes,
I mean, unlimited, but that's just, go ahead. Yeah.
all the paintings and pictures of Vishnu is with one head except for Virat Rupa.
Yeah. But he has his heads everywhere because he expands everywhere. And not only that, this, I say my hand, but it's actually Krishna's hand. And that's another meaning of the Sahasra Shirsha. He has so many hands.
Atulyam, Radha's question, it's an unrelated question. Is the Sudama whom Krishna meets when he goes to Mathura the same Sudama who was his Gurukula friend?
Oh no, very different. There's multiple. There's Sudama, his cowherd boyfriend. There's Sudama the florist, and there's Sudama who he went to school with. They just have the same name. They're not different. They're different persons.
Snehavalli Mataji's question. Yesterday I referred to Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila chapter 5 verse 41 and Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3 chapter 26 verses 21 to 32. I found the function of Aniruddha and Pradyumna mentioned differently at both places. Aniruddha as predominating deity of ego and Pradyumna as deity of mind. Little clarification will be helpful.
Yeah, it may be an editorial mistake.
Amara Mataji's question.
She could bring that to Dravida's attention and see what Dravida has to say. Is this an editorial mistake? How to, because it's not, it's just factually different. So which is it? How to, should the editors correct the problem or something like that?
Amara Mataji has two questions. I want to express my deep gratitude to you for sharing this Vedic wisdom with us. This is unfathomable, yet feels so related and extremely fascinating. I have two questions. One, how the demigods are able to feel the ecstasy through Vrajavasis when they do not reside in their bodies, since they are directly controlled by Krishna.
We discussed that yesterday. The sun is in one place, but the light of the sun travels throughout the universe. So the presence of the sun is throughout the universe, through the energy of the sun. Similarly, the mercy that Krishna gives to the residents of Vrindavan can be extended to others besides the residents of Vrindavan. And at least one of the readings, one of the understandings is because they're very merciful, they're extending that mercy to the demigods, like, the energy being distributed by the energetic source, or the recipients of the energy distributing to another recipient of that energy. The mercy energy. So therefore they're experiencing.
And Amara Mataji's second question is, if my mind wants to read Srimad Bhagavatam, but I go sleepy, then are the two deities manifesting?
Don't worry about the deities. Worry about where your consciousness is, please.
Okay.
That's my answer. Don't get into this over-analytical thing. You'll get lost. The essence is, what is your desire? They'll reciprocate. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.